60.2. All right, I think quickly we'll talk about the latest set of Mueller indictments, which is of 12 Russians for hacking into the DNC. All I have to say about it is they say that Mueller can't come out with new indictments or new stuff any later than like September 1st because that risks screwing with the election too close. So I think it's the hope of many liberals, including me, that some more indictments come out, but in the next month and a half, enough to make enough people vote Democratic that the House flips. That's all I got for that.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm surprised you missed the obvious point that none of these Russians are indicted for colluding with Trump. They're indicted for hacking computers, which is the kind of stuff Russians do. I mean, that doesn't... I'm not surprised.
Well, that's why I said hope rather than expect.
Yeah, so I'm just saying that it's a massive witch hunt.
Except it's caught 34 people.
Yeah, 34 Russians and
5
2
Americans
guys in process crimes. A process crime is when they get you because you answered a question incorrectly when they interviewed you.
Not Manafort. Manafort got nailed.
Getting
nailed
for things that he did in 2005. So it's just a witch hunt, and the only honorable thing for the Democrats to do if they weren't scum would be to say, look, we're trying to find out what the Russians did during the election, and this really doesn't have anything to do with Trump, and then there would be no problem.
Yeah, that's what Giuliani said. So anyway, I don't know if we need to go further.
Well, he was right.
He's not right about dental habits.
Okay, what's the next subject?
IQ. You and I had a long session last week that wasn't filmed because our director was out of town. But you still need to paint because the paint will dry unless you are working it. And we saw some podcasts listened to some podcasts about IQ, and then we had a little bit of discussion. And one of the issues with IQ, well, first off, IQ is not intelligence. IQ attempts to measure intelligence, but it's not a great measure of intelligence. It's like what Churchill says about democracy. It's the worst form of government except for every other form. And IQ, same deal. Worst way to measure intelligence except for every other way to measure it. That being said, there are issues around IQ where some people argue, like you listen to this guy named, Stefan Molyneux or something?
Yeah. I think that's how you pronounce his name.
Yeah, and he kind of argues that IQ is genetic. And then there are other people, like Flynn, who discovered the Flynn effect, that the world's IQ, the average IQ of everybody on the planet, has been going up fairly steadily since World War II, says it's cultural. And I believe in Flynn. I think that it's much easier to have differences in IQ show. Cultural evolution is much faster than genetic evolution. And, cultural has 2 parts. It's both the house you grow up in, or the apartment you grow up in, and how chaotic it is, and what's talked about over dinner, and how much media is available, and the type of media, and the aspirations that are encouraged in your household. And there's also prenatal and postnatal care and nutrition. Neither of which is genetic, and both of which can influence IQ. And there might be a third and a half thing, which is discouragement. And I think all those things contribute to what appear to be racial differences in IQ. rather than genetics?
As far as whether it's nature or nurture that creates intelligence, I don't think, I don't know as much as Rick does. He's an expert on intelligence tests.
Also, our director is,
Okay, well,
who spent 2 years giving intelligence tests to people.
Well, just to finish my thought, I don't think anybody knows for sure whether it's nature or nurture. Whether it's genetic or whether it's based on, your the way you were raised. So I don't want to go out on a limb and say anything one way or the other, but that is it is a difficult issue, and there are different sides to it, and I don't think we know enough right now to say for sure. I will say one thing controversial.
Okay.
And that is that Jews, by every estimate, have the highest IQs, and that's been my experience in life too. I mean, the Jews are smarter. You know what? You can call me a racist, but it's true.
Well, you grew up in a Jewish household. Did you grow up wanting to play pro basketball? What did you guys discuss around the dinner table?
No, actually, you know what? We've had this discussion, and my argument that I said a year ago is that I thought Jews were smart because there were a lot of physicists and scientists, and I thought that's just great. But then I found out that Diego Velázquez, the greatest painter by some people's estimates, was Jewish. And then I was like freaking out because I was thinking, wow, that means Einstein, Freud, Jesus, Velázquez, and Trotsky and Marx, and basically, many giants in their fields are Jewish. And, we have to look at that and say, well, what the hell is going on? So I'm not saying any particular race is dumber, but I will go, you can call me any name you want. I do think Jews are smarter.
I'd say that, there's maybe some genetics involved, but I'd say that most of it is cultural. I mean, look at Asians. Asians are the Jews of now. Smart Jews are 20th century. Smart Asians are 21st century. I'd say it's largely cultural.
Well, how do you explain this? In Spain, in the 17th century, they had the greatest painters in the world. And they had a whole culture devoted to doing nothing but making paintings. And the best of them was a Jew.
Well, here's what happened.
From a culture that didn't even have any painters in it at all.
Let's assume that there was, you said 17th century?
Yeah.
All right, so there must have been a 17th century version of kickball in school. And Velázquez, in the 17th century Spanish version of second grade, gets picked last for the kickball team. He's just not very coordinated. So Velázquez sits inside and starts practicing painting because he's just bad at PE. And by the time he's 17, he's got 10 extra years of painting practice under his belt, and that eventually turns into him being the greatest portrait painter of all, or greatest painter of all time. Being bad at PE. Jews have a long tradition of being spazzes. Another couple issues with IQ is...
I don't think that's what happened, Rick, because we know that he was apprenticed to a famous painter, the way all painters were. He went through the same exact things. It's just that for every Spaniard, every Catholic that was trying to be a painter, there was probably 1,000 to 1, maybe 10,000 to 1 to one Jew. And probably the only Jew in Spain at that time that took up painting turns out to be the best one of all time. It's just that, and Einstein and Freud and Marx and Jesus and I mean, the list goes on and on. It's crazy. William Shatner and Leonard Nimoy, both Jews, the greatest Starfleet captains.
Yeah. Well, Einstein talked about a thing called Sitzfleisch, which is sitting flesh, which is the ability to sit your ass down and work something out for 10 hours, without getting up to piss or anything. You just sit down. So
the only thing that gets me up is to piss. If I could just sit in this chair for the next 36 hours, I'd be fine. So there is some merit to that argument.
Yeah. And I gotta say that the people who argue about racial differences in IQ, a lot of those people have kind of icky agendas. Not everybody, but a lot of them are like, oh, well, look at the average IQ of people from this country. Well, no wonder, and we, they need our help, and that our help generally shapes up as being, we're going to be in charge of you guys.
My agenda is I want single Jewish guys to be able to have a girlfriend, which is, almost as hard as dominating the world. You get to be in my position. But anyway, go on with what you were saying.
All right, point 2 is it doesn't frickin' matter if there are racial differences or not. I mean, it does in some instances where, you've got a kid who's having trouble in school, and how do you boost that kid's performance? But that's a more, it's specific to each person. But it doesn't really matter. The potential racial differences don't matter, because on the horizon are what I call brain buddies. There's probably a less dumb name for that, but technology, digital technology that you wear that helps you with mental performance. I mean, we already have that with our phones to some extent. Nobody needs to know directions anymore because we have Waze. And that's just the number of things that you can get help with is going to just continue to increase. And we're going to start seeing digital assistants that help people with early onset dementia, with dyslexia. Our brain, there's this saying that no man is an island, which means, it's the old-fashioned version of it takes a village, that nobody works in isolation. But I've said this before, we are isolated because each of us is locked into our own skulls. But technology gets closer and closer to releasing us from being isolated with our thoughts being just happening only in our skulls. And eventually we're going to have all sorts of built-ins and add-ons that will augment our information processing abilities. And
can you talk a little bit, Rick, about we talked about the bell curve the last time in terms of our conversation here. Can you talk about like culturally biased tests? Do you have any information?
Well, the first tests, IQ as a concept began in France with Binet, who developed a test to determine what kind of help kids need in school. Kids who score low need extra help for being dumb. Kids who score high need extra help for being smart. Van Terman, at the turn of the century, in like the teens, 10, 12, whatever, takes the idea and runs with it and starts developing tests. And the first time that like a shitload of people, as far as I know, were given IQ tests were recruits for the U.S. Army during World War I. And it was found that Germanic, Northern European, blonde people, Aryan people scored much better than everybody else on these IQ tests. But when these tests were, so it was thought that, the swarthy people of Southern Europe, not to mention the even swarthier people from other parts of the world, it was thought they were dumber. But these tests were looked at in subsequent years, and they had questions like, they showed a drawing of a hood ornament, and then they asked somebody taking the IQ test, well, what make of car does this hood ornament belong to? And it's like, yeah, maybe Giuseppe, just over, who's only been in America for 2 months, might not know that hood ornament is a Packard. And then eventually, after decades, tests that are called culture fair, which is, they don't have any, they're supposed to avoid, your experiential background. That if you didn't grow up, with parents who belong to a country club, you'll still do equally well, given equal intelligence as somebody who did grow up, in the Hamptons. And so you have tests like the Raven, progressive matrices, which is that tic-tac-toe test, where you've got 8 squares and 9 squares, 1 square is empty, and you have to figure out which pattern goes in that square, so it doesn't depend on words, it just depends on pattern recognition. But even that thing, I've researched that thing, even that thing is gender biased to some extent, depending on the age of the test takers. It's really hard to be fair in IQ tests.
Yeah, but I mean, here's the thing. Actually, you're saying that it's cultural, not genetic. But isn't that just as outrageous? Because now you're saying that certain cultures aren't as intellectual as other cultures.
Well, it's not good, it's still, kind of racist.
Exactly.
It's less racist. It goes less to the heart of people's existences than saying it's genetic.
Okay.
It's just saying that that if you guys, conservatives are fond of saying, every time gun control is brought up, look at Chicago, everybody's getting shot there like every second of every day. And it's not an entirely legitimate argument, but it does kind of relate to the idea that, people living on the thin economic, the edge of or in poverty in Chicago or in the cities with fragmented families, single parents, that their households may not be as enriched as like a stable 2-parent household. Flynn makes the point that, let me just say how Flynn makes the point, where say you've got a 2-parent, 1-kid household. He says, imagine the discussions that go on in that household. You got 2 adults talking to each other about stuff, and the kid overhears stuff, and there's a lot of adult talk in that house. Then compare that to a single mom raising 3 kids. There's no adult talk in that house. There's only get off the fucking couch, put down the cat. It's talking, it's yelling at kids. That's not as enriched an environment as 2 adults talking about what happened at the office, or what somebody read online about fiscal policy or whatever.
Okay, well, now that you've allowed me to speak, I would just like to say that this is all the Democrats' fault. For some weird reason, you brought up conservatives talking about Chicago. Well, the reason that black people have 75% single-parent households with no father in the house is because the Democrats brought in these liberal programs where they actually paid people to have kids if the father left the house. So as a result, millions of black people, women, married the government.
Well, I'm not
And-
sure if
and-
75%.
Yeah, 75% of black households have no father in the house.
Is that still the policy?
Well, yeah, it is, because what happens is, if if you have a kid and there's no father in the house, the Democrats will give you money for each kid. And if you're willing to live poor, you can actually make you can make a living. You can get by.
Not a good living.
Not a good living.
There's
but
been
you,
welfare reform since
good
20.
enough. You can get by if you have more kids and you make sure you don't get married. All this to say that the worst thing that happened to the black race in the United States since Jim Crow was liberal policies forced on them by the Democrats that broke up the black family and caused 75% to grow up in households without fathers, and which leads inevitably to, I believe, one out of every two black people, men, being involved in the criminal justice system.
You wouldn't say there's institutional prejudice that adds to that?
No, because 50% of all the murders in the United States are caused by 6.5% of the population, black men. And it's because their fathers have been driven out of their households by liberal welfare policies.
All right, that statistic I'm going to question.
You question it all you want, buddy
All right,
boy.
breaking-
You question it all you want. There's a computer in this
All right,
household.
let's do it. When you're rolling? 60.2 and a half. First, a moment of silence for the 3.5 million Twitter followers I lost this week. Twitter got rid of a bunch of bots, and I bought a lot of bots in years past, and they are all gone now. Though they left me with 1 million followers who turned out to be somewhat legit. So the bots did not die in vain, because before they were killed by Twitter, they made my Twitter feed look very popular and drove a bunch of people, actual people, to it. So thank you. Your sacrifice will not be for that. All right, so I read some statistics, and there are a couple things that I'll bring up. Lance said that half the murders in the U.S. are committed by 6.5% of the population, black males. That is deceptive for a couple reasons. One is less than 40% of murders are classified by race. Most murders aren't solved, or where they are solved, you don't necessarily get the race of the perpetrator entered into the database. So this is, more than 60% of murders, we don't know the race of the murderer. Thing two is the number of people killed by whites and the number of people killed by blacks for the past 10 years, that's how far back the statistics we looked at go, are roughly equal. And there are roughly 4 whites for every black. So that 6.5% makes it sound like 1/16 the population is doing half the murders. But it's really the murder rate.
Wait. You're saying that if in the United States that you have as much likelihood of being killed by a white person as by a black person. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. That's what the statistics say.
Right. But black people represent black men are only 6.5% of the population. No, it's not deceptive.
No, it is, because you're talking about whites versus blacks.
Yeah.
And
well,
whites,
you're talking all other races.
No.
No, you're talking about all other
the
races.
statistics I read.
Yes.
The number of people killed by whites
Yeah.
is roughly equal to the number of people killed by blacks.
Right.
So you have to compare those percentages.
Right, but blacks are only 6.5% of the population.
No.
What don't I understand here? Black
You,
math.
you don't understand Bayesian math. Well, your 6.5% is roughly
6.5.
No, is roughly 1/16 the population.
Okay.
So naively, it sounds like black men are killing people at 15 times, 16 times the rate of everybody else.
I don't know whether it's 15 or 16 times. I know that
It's definitely a
there
higher
are,
rate.
There are how many blacks in America? They represent 6%.
No,
So
12.6% of the U.S. population is black.
Okay, so
Roughly
six-
51% is white.
Okay, so 6% of the population is killing 50% of the people that are being
No.
killed.
No. That's not what the statistic is.
That
It's
is
just-
what the statistic is.
No, it's different. The statistic I read said the number of people killed by whites, whitey, 51% of the
right.
population, equals the number of people killed by black
But
people.
that bolsters my argument.
Well, not entirely.
No, it does, because if you have 4 white men
Yes, for every black man.
and you have 1 black man,
Yeah, it's 4 to 1.
and the white people kill 4, each white man kills 4 people, and the black man kills 4 people on his own.
It's 4 to 1. The rate is 4 to 1.
Right. So
But
it
it's
just
not
means that-
16 or 15 to 1.
I didn't say it was.
No, but that's when you cite that statistic.
I'm saying that black people are committing murder at an
At a-
infinitely greater rate. than
Not
whites are.
infinitely, because
Well, not infinitely. You're right. Not infinitely. Sorry. Math mistake. Not infinitely, but at a vastly greater rate.
at a much higher rate.
Yes.
But it's a rate of 4 to 1 rather than the implied 15 or 16 to
Well,
1.
it's 4 to 1 compared to all whites. But what
Yeah.
about Hispanics and Asians?
That's not what the statistics looked at.
No, it is what the statistics.
No,
look
No,
at.
not-
No.
we've
It's 50% of all murders compared to 50% by all other
You and I
races.
each read that article.
I'll read it again.
Look in the article.
It says here.
We're
that
going over
50
this.
roughly half of murders are committed by blacks.
Now go to that U.S. News and World.
That's what I read. I only had to read that one sentence.
That's not the deal here.
Here, wait. Okay, look.
There it is.
All right.
There it is.
Black people have consistently accounted for close to half the country's homicide victims, making up more than 50% of the broader pool of those killed overall. Oh, victims. We're talking about victims.
All right. Go. The last graph in that article has the deal. All the way down. Wait. Go back up.
You want to shut the camera off while we do this?
No, hold on.
Is this another graph?
No, that's a video somebody's talking about.
Oh, okay. All right. Do we need to shut the camera off? This may take a minute.
No. Okay. White on white, black on black.
No, I'm not worried about white and white or black and black. I'm just saying all black
Here,
murder
wait.
and all white murder.
So homicide victims by race.
I'm not
Black-
talking about victims. I'm talking about perpetrators.
Well,
And I'm not talking about interracial.
anyway, all these graphs are about blacks versus whites. They're not talking about Asians. They're not talking about Hispanics.
I don't care about your graphs. I'm saying that blacks account for 50% of the murderers in the United States, even though they represent 6.5% of the population. That's undisputed. You can turn off the camera and look
All right,
at
turn
it
it off.
again.
Turn it off. We'll turn it off. 60.2 3/4. All right, we've looked over those statistics. Let me start with this, which is you're saying 6.5% of the population, but what you're ignoring is that guys of all races do most of the killing. More than 90% of the murdering is from guys.
Okay.
So it's not 6.5% of guys doing all the murder of people. It's 13% of all guys being black guys. Because by knocking it, by saying just that it's this tiny segment of the population, 6.5% is doing all the murdering.
Correct.
It makes it sound like black guys are killing people at a rate 15 times higher than whitey, when it's really like 4 or 5 times higher than whitey, which isn't great, but it's not as dire as 15 or 16 times.
Nothing to worry about. Everything's fine.
And you can also argue, since you're only looking at a sample of 39% of murders, which are the ones that got solved, there's more than 60% of murders, we don't know the race. We could probably assume the race in a lot of cases, but I don't know what the cases are. It may be that whitey is better at not getting caught.
Rick, this is the dumbest argument.
It's not, because 3/5 of murders aren't solved.
Yeah, but Rick, what is the what? Then what that means is that what proof do you have that the numbers don't hold up in the ones they didn't solve?
Maybe they do, but I'm just saying, among the 2/5 of murders that are solved,
yeah,
black guys
yes
are murdery at a rate between 4 and 5 times the rate of white guys, which is bad, but it's not as bad as 15 times the rate.
And I will say again, I don't know why we're arguing about this.
Okay.
50% of all people murdered in the United States are murdered by black men, who represent 6.5% of the population.
Yeah, which is a way of saying it that makes it sound worse.
I don't care how it sounds.
Yeah, but
I'm not trying to influence you and make you feel bad. I'm not trying to make you feel bad.
Somebody was trying to influence you by expressing it that way. There's a famous book from the 60s called How to Lie with Statistics.
It's not a lie.
It's a way of expressing
it. If half of all the murders in the United States were committed by Jewish men, I would be very worried about what is going on with Jewish men. And you know what I would think? I would say maybe those Jewish men don't have fathers in the household, because in black families, 75% of the fathers are not in the household because of liberal policies that paid black women to have children without getting married. There was a financial incentive to force the father out of the house. And now 50% of black men have had involvement with the penal system, and 50% of murders are caused by black men.
All right,
This is your fault. This is the fault of the welfare state. And what's more, the Democrats are fully aware of this situation, yet they continue to promote these policies because they would rather have poor people dependent on them for welfare that they can get votes from than what is best for the black community.
So would you end welfare altogether?
No.
How would you do it?
I would say that I would make it imperative that the black father stay with the family. I would reduce incentives that force the black father out of the household. And in fact, I would create incentive to keep him there.
Since the 80s, those incentives have been reduced, right?
No, Obama went right back to all the reforms of the Clinton and Gingrich era were overturned by Obama.
Why?
Because he likes to have lots of people on welfare.
Yeah, that sounds glib.
No, it's because the Democrat Party thrives on poverty. Poverty and welfare are the results of the socialist policies And those policies help keep the Democrats elected so that they can have this massive underclass that depends on them for their welfare checks. People that are on welfare are not going to get the same kind of kid gloves treatment from Republicans. So they're going to keep voting Democrat. That's the philosophy of your party.
So-
you're called poverty hustlers. That's
By
one
Republicans.
Yeah, one of the reasons I hate Democrats and I hate Democrat policies is because you don't really give a damn about black crime and black poverty. What you want is to keep blacks dependent on your programs so that you can keep getting their votes. And the fact that it's torn their society apart is irrelevant to you. And it's torn it apart entirely because of Democrat policies begun in the Johnson administration. Did you know that in the 1920s, it was more common for a black father to stay with his children than for a white father?
No, I didn't know that.
Well, that's the case. In fact, before, in the 50s, black unemployment was actually lower among teenagers than white unemployment. But black young people were more likely to have a job than white young people before the Great Society of the Johnson administration.
Fine. So some Great Society policies backfired, right?
That is correct.
Okay. But you're also using that as an excuse to squeeze social benefit programs. There has to be you said you weren't in favor of getting rid of welfare altogether.
No, I'm not.
Would
I
you-
think there needs to be a safety net for people that are desperate, for people that fall on hard times, and I'm happy if the government pays for certain work programs, get people some job training, vocational training. But things that drive the father out of the household, absolutely against that. I don't know the mechanics
Okay, you know
of
what?
how it should be changed.
I'm going to give you that.
Thank you.
And so let's move on to something else. What do you want, Kavanaugh?
So Kavanaugh, speaking of families, he grew up, he was an only child. His mom was a teacher, became a prosecutor, a lawyer, a judge. His father became a lawyer, so he seemed to have a great upbringing, lending an argument to support Lance's argument. How do you feel about Kavanaugh in general?
Well, you know, I don't like his.
Frat boy.
I don't like his politics, of course, because he's pretty Federalist Society conservative. And I think his hair is too poofy. I think he's a guy who still blow dries his hair. Beyond that, what are you going to do? I think it's going to be really tough for Democrats to get the 50 or 51 votes to stop him from being confirmed.
My opinion is it just shows how disgusting the Democrats are, that, they've tried for 25 years to legislate from the bench. They've tried to use the Supreme Court to get the American people to do things that they can't get the American people to do from the ballot box. So weirdly, they've taken on this attitude that virtually anybody Trump puts up, they're going to be against. And if they're against Kavanaugh,
they're all off a list from the Federalist Society.
Yeah, and unfortunately, the Federalist Society believes in a stricter interpretation of the Constitution.
Well, that's what they say.
Well, but that's
No,
what
they call it
want to do.
originalism, but it's still another form of judicial activism.
No, it isn't.
Yeah,
No, it
it
isn't. No, because judicial activism is finding things that you say should be in the Constitution that aren't. It's just judicial act. If it wasn't for judicial activism, you wouldn't have abortion in the third trimester and gay marriage.
So, Well, I don't find
If
anything.
the American people didn't want that,
Some did.
yeah. But
And
then
abortion
why-
in the third trimester is only for people with serious medical problems. It's not
No.
at will.
No, I believe 6 states, all Democrat except for Mississippi, abortion in the third trimester is legal for whatever reason you want. So that's what you want, Rick. It's all, you know what? You guys are so full of compassion, you Democrats. You just want third.
I don't want- I
you
don't-
just want third trimester abortion.
Really, right up to.
Abortion in the 7.5 month. How do you like that, Rick? You think the American
I don't like-
people? Yeah. So you don't. So somehow the Supreme Court just found that legal, huh? And that's what you want.
Wait, you're into states' rights. You just said 6 states voted for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so that's states' rights. It's not. It's not. I don't like it, unless the mother's life is in danger.
No. If the mother's okay, well then you're not a Democrat again. Jesus Christ, Rick. Do we have to do this every week? You're a Republican. You're
No.
against abortion in the third trimester.
Abortion at will for no good reason.
Yes, you're a Republican.
No, that doesn't make me a Republican.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't. That's ridiculous.
But that's what Hillary Clinton, Obama, and the Pelosi and Schumer are all for abortion on demand.
Did you have a quote? I bet you could find quotes from each of them where they say that abortion in the third trimester is not desirable.
Let's look it up.
All right, we're breaking again.
Not desirable is not the same as illegal.
Well, let's see what they say.
Did you turn it off?
Not yet.
All right.
All right, let's motherfucking see what they motherfucking. Ow, my fucking hemorrhoid.
Shall we continue voting or?
1:30.
No, quit.
Okay.
Either he voted against it or he didn't.
Who else are you looking at?
Schumer, Pelosi, Clinton, and Obama. And I'm not so sure about old Clinton either, by the way. You said you found that, but I
Yeah.
didn't read it.
Well, we can go back to that.
Read it and I'll say,
Okay,
okay?
Okay, we roll.
All right, 60.2 3/4 or 7/8. 7/8. All right, so we read some stuff. And,
Why is, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
all right, so Hillary Clinton says she's in favor of a ban on some late-term abortions as long as you leave the door open for those abortions if the mental or physical health of the mother is threatened. For instance, some babies are either dead in the womb and not miscarried, or they don't have a brain, or they're so mutated that they have no chance of surviving outside the womb. And if you're 7 months in, it could be terrible for the mom to have to carry an unviable baby for 2 months. And in the case of that, it's not unreasonable to remove the unviable, brainless, or hopelessly mutated baby. I think that's a common sense thing. I think most people, I think most people are not in favor of third trimester, that is, last third of the pregnancy abortions willy-nilly, just because somebody wants one. I think most people also are okay with them in certain tragic situations, where it's going to keeping the baby is going to kill the mom, or the baby is dead or otherwise not viable. And that, I think, is Clinton's point of view. And I would guess that's Obama's point of view, though I couldn't find, I found something that states that that's his point of view, but I couldn't find a quote. All right, Lance.
All right. I made a statement, and I have to get this very clear because the Democrats are scum on this as usual. I made a statement that Rick is a Republican because he has the same view I do on abortion. That is, he's against partial birth abortion, abortion in the third trimester, and Schumer, Pelosi, Clinton, and Obama are for abortion in the third trimester. Now, don't you dare interrupt me.
If.
Don't you dare interrupt me. Now, this is what I found out. First of all, Clinton says she's against it if there's a danger to the mother's health or her mental health. So mental health could be anything. I could go in and say I'm in my 8th month and I have mental health issues. So that's her sneaky way out of it.
I don't think she meant that. I think she meant.
Well, that's what she said.
No, she only said that one. You could only find that one sentence. But I bet if you asked her to expand on it,
I don't care what you bet.
I bet
she said she's against partial birth. She's for partial birth abortion banning unless it's a danger to the woman's health, physical or mental.
That's right.
Mental's not good enough, Rick. That's just a way out.
That's a one-sentence quote. Now, we don't know what.
I just have to believe it. Sorry.
So you think that if somebody's feelings are going to be hurt by carrying a baby to term, that they can just go ask for it? I don't think that's what she meant.
That's what mental health means.
No, I think she meant the common sense thing is if you're carrying a non-viable baby.
That's not what she said. But
because she only said one sentence. She didn't write a whole frickin' essay on it.
Okay.
Also, let's talk about.
Wait a minute. You said I could talk. Now you're interrupting me.
Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Then Obama is for his record in the Illinois Senate and his record in response to the 2004 Supreme Court decision is that he's for abortion in the third trimester. There's no way around it. Schumer and Pelosi pull the same shit that Clinton does because they all say, don't you interrupt me. They all say that they're against a ban of third trimester abortion because there's the life of the mother to consider. Now, the reason I know this is because they had to choose a side in 2004. It was up before the Supreme Court. Or in the Senate. It was a combination of both. It was a bill. Now,
who wrote the bill?
Listen to me.
Who wrote the bill?
Listen to me.
Who wrote the bill?
The
Republicans wrote the bill.
Okay. I read the bill. I was forced to read the bill. Don't you interrupt me. I was forced to read the bill because I kept hearing this shit from Pelosi and Schumer and Clinton and Obama. And they all said, but what about the life of the mother? So I think to myself, there's something fishy going on because I know the Democrats are scum and they will lie. And so I read the bill and it says, first sentence, if there's a danger to the life of the mother, you can have your partial birth abortion. So what they did was they lied. They knew that the bill said that the life of the mother was an exception, but they told everyone in the media, and our dear friend Rick, who's a brainwashed zombie, believed it, and they fooled everybody. They just went out there and said, what about the life of the mother? Because they knew that the average American wouldn't read the bill and see that that was an exception in the bill.
Everybody's quote.
And I found that in 2 minutes. But the only reason I found it is because I knew Democrats will lie.
All right, so a thing well, both parties like to do it. The Republicans do it, though. What else was in the bill? How long was the bill? Was it one paragraph? What the Republicans like to do, and I'm sure the Democrats do it too, is they take a thing, they build a trap. This had a provision for the life of the mother. And then they build in a bunch of other stuff like defunding Planned Parenthood or who knows what else to make it impossible for the Democrats to vote for it. And then when they don't vote for it, they say, it's because of this. We already had for the life of the mother in there. So they're not really saying that. It's a trap. But most reasonable, it's like when you love to say that the Democrats are in favor of open borders. And really the most recent survey I read shows that like the most lunatic 1% of Democrats are in favor of open borders, which means that well over 90% are not. And I'm sure that most reasonable people in the country, including the politicians you mentioned, are, as I explained, they're only in favor of third trimester abortions when there's a legitimate medical reason for it, not just because somebody's going to get their fifi hurt to keep carrying a baby.
Rick,
it's politics.
I've just explained the truth.
No, that's in your mind.
No. The truth is, the bill said life of the mother was an exception. All 4 Democrats were against the bill.
Do you want to show me the bill and we can see
Sure.
what else is in the bill? All
Turn
right,
off
breaking
the fucking
again.
light. I can't, man. This is just dealing with it. Is it still filming? Yeah. When you have a zombie, you have to be very, very careful. They have to read everything because they've been brainwashed very deeply. So you have to go, okay, here it is. Shown here. Public Law, number 108-105. November 5th, 2003.
Is this the entirety
This
of the
measure
bill?
has been amended since the conference report was filed in the House on September 30th, 2003. The summary of that version is repeated here. Partial Birth Abortion Ban Act of 2003 amends the Federal Criminal Code to prohibit any physician or other individual from knowingly performing a partial birth abortion except when necessary to save the life of a mother whose life is endangered by a physical disorder, illness, or injury.
So it says physical disorder, illness, or injury.
Yes.
So everybody that was saying mental,
I'm done. Show's over, guys. You have to go amuse yourself some other way.
so everybody said
I've bled enough tonight.
everybody who said mental or physical didn't like this bill, perhaps because it only mentions physical health of the mother. And I believe, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I need to do some research during the next week to find out if the mental thing involves non-viable fetuses. It does some other stuff. Authorizes the father, if married to the mother at the time of the abortion, and the maternal grandparents of the fetus, if the mother is to obtain specific relief. So this bill doesn't just say it's okay. I knew there was other stuff in the bill. This says that the dad can step in and stop the mom from having an abortion. I'm not sure if that's just third trimester, but I think it's any time during the deal. Authorizes a defendant accused of an offense under this act to seek a hearing before on whether the physician's conduct was necessary to save the life of the mother. Anyway, there's other stuff in here that the biggest nugget I can find just looking at it quickly is that it lets the dad stop an abortion if he wants the mom to go ahead with it, which puts dads in charge of abortions. It preserves the woman's right to choose only if the dad says, yeah, okay. So I can see why Schumer and Pelosi and Clinton and Obama may not have wanted that. And yeah, it's a trap. Put some stuff in that liberals can't vote for, and then say they couldn't vote for it because of this other thing. And all right, hey, subscribe to us to have this kind of fun,
So,
every frickin' week.
so
And then-
all of a sudden, so now you're a textualist when it comes to this bill.
I'm just saying it contains stuff that beyond just the late term abortion exception for the physical health of the mother. It contains other stuff. It puts the dad in charge of whether the mom can have an abortion or not.
Do you find that Rick is now it's a textual now he's
Lance
a
is
textualist
done.
all of a
Lance is
sudden,
done.
Lance?
You should probably just sing Volver and get us out of here.
Living, breathing. Now it's living and breathing, or is it a textual bill? What would you say?
Lance is done. Sing
Este
Volver.
amor apasionado anda todo alborotado por volver. Voy camino a la locura, aunque todo me tortura, sé perder. Nos dejamos hace tiempo, pero me llegó el momento por volver. Tú tenías mucha razón, le hago caso al corazón y me muero por volver y volver, volver, volver a tus brazos otra vez. Llegaré hasta donde estés. Yo sé perder. Quiero volver, volver, volver.
All right. As somebody who's in his 177th trimester to somebody who's in his 174th, good show. Nobody should abort us
All
at
right.
this point.